DNA Clarity and Support. I'm your host, Brianne. Listen as I chat with authors and leaders in the DNA world about the family and personal impacts of DNA testing. You'll hear news stories, unique perspectives, find out about books, websites, organizations, other podcasts for those involved in the world of DNA. Please be sensitive to younger listeners as the conversations can get intense at times. This is a production of Watershed DNA. Learn more at watersheddna.com.
Hi, Jen. Welcome to the DNA Clarity and Support podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I have today Jen Jacober. Jen is a genetic counselor, and she is also donor conceived and wrote a little bit about her experience for the Watershed DNA blog a number of years ago. And I invited you to talk with me today to get a little bit of an update, see how things have changed in your life, just ask some questions about what that was like, finding out that you're donor conceived in light of your professional work. So I really am glad that you have come today.
Happy to be here.
So it's been about 5 years, and correct me if I'm wrong. Has it been about 5 years?
About that, yep.
So tell me a little bit about your discovery.
Yeah, so I always knew that my parents did IVF to have me. I was told all about their journey of infertility for, I think, over 10 years or so. So I knew all about that background. And then during COVID, my mom came to visit me. I live in a different state. So I think that was the first kind of red flag something was up when she came during COVID far away. But she came to visit me and told me that when they did IVF many years ago, I'm 33 now, so I was 28 at the time, that they used a donor egg. So it was shocking, pretty shocking news. I just had absolutely no idea. Always been told that I looked like my mom. And so it was really surprising. And since then, it took a while, obviously, to process that information. But I think I've come to terms with it and accepted this kind of new reality in a way. So yeah, that's kind of how it happened.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I'm wondering if you know what was the deciding factor on your parents' side to decide when you were 28 that it was the right time.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that there were various points in time where they thought about telling me that there was something holding them back. Like, I remember my mom saying that, like, after I graduated college, they were really wanting to tell me, and that I had a big breakup with my long-term boyfriend at the time. So I think that maybe the timing never seemed right to them. And I was, at the point when they told me, I was, pretty settled. I was married. I had already been working for a couple of years and felt pretty secure. So I think they thought now is a good time. We were thinking about having kids in the future, and I think that really pushed them to make the decision too.
Thank you for sharing about that with me. When your mom decided to travel, do you know if there was discussion about whether your dad was also going to be there for the conversation, or how that worked out for them?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly. I think he had some sort of like back surgery or something, was like somewhat recent. There was some like medical reason, nothing major at the time. And they actually, I think, disagreed with the decision at various points. I think he came around and realized that it's some information I needed to know. My mom was always, or from what I've been told, more adamant about sharing. And so, yeah, I think it was just something that he had going on at the time. We talked on the phone like right after. So he was involved, but.
Got it. So they were on the same page. It was just that was how they agreed to do the sharing.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I've talked with a number of parents that were deciding to share with their adult children about donor conception. And that's a very common experience from talking with couples is that one person, it's not always the mom, sometimes it's dad, will be ready before the other one is. And then that can create some tension in itself because then it feels like more urgent to one parent than the other.
Right. Yeah. And I think that she just had made the decision that I needed to know and I needed to know now. And I think they had talked about pushing the trip back so that he could come too. But then it was just so unclear what was happening in the world and like with travel restrictions and things like that. I think she was like, I need to do this now before this window closes potentially. So
I want to ask one other question about that, like disclosure time, that time that you found out. What is a strong memory that you have from that sitting down with your mom that you'd be willing to talk about a little?
Yeah, I think I remember right after I was obviously very upset and shocked. And I went into the bathroom and I remember looking at the mirror and just not really recognizing myself. And it was just such a weird, like mind. It was just like an unbelievable, sensation that like, who am I? Like, what is this? And then after that, I don't know why I felt this way, but I told lots of people almost immediately. Like I felt like I was just living this lie or this secret. And I told my husband was there, so he heard, but I told all of my like closest friends, and I insisted that she tell like the rest of our family because I didn't want this to be a secret any longer. So that's probably like that immediate like feeling and that reaction and wanting people to know right away. It's probably the most memorable.
Thank you. Switching gears a little bit, when you found out that you were donor conceived and that an egg donor had been used, did your mom have any information to share with you about the identity of the egg donor?
Not a whole lot, which I hear is a very common thing, especially this was in the 80s. And so they were told, the clinic at the time, obviously they didn't know what was going to happen with all these directed just to consumer testing companies and things, but they were told like not to tell. So I think they were in the business of, why do we even need this kind of information? But all that she knew was that the woman was on the shorter side, which makes sense because so am I, and kind of looked like my mom. I think that's why they picked her. And she wore glasses. So and she passed like the basic health screen. But other than that, we had no information. After the fact, and actually leading up to my mom coming down to visit, she had reached out to the clinic to see what kind of information she could get and was basically told it didn't exist, or I think everyone gets told it burned down, like there's
fires seem to be overly common.
Yeah, interesting. But yeah, just the records didn't exist. And even if they did, it would have been very, very limited. So
on your side, did you decide to do anything with that information in terms of trying to
I also reached out to the clinic, which still exists. And at the time was one of only, a handful in the country. So I reached out to them. That didn't really go anywhere. I immediately signed up for 23andMe and Ancestry.com and did that right away. I just needed as much information as I could possibly get, basically. I think I even did another one too. But anyways, and then just jumped into what was out there online, like Facebook groups and the donor sibling registry network, and realized that there were a lot of other people. This was a pretty common story. So other people in their like late discovery people who were navigating this at the same time as me. So that was really nice to, have a little bit of a community, I guess.
So at that time, and even still now, you were working professionally as a genetic counselor. And I remember you writing in your blog post that you had put your reservations aside as a genetic counselor, meaning your like opinions towards direct-to-consumer testing because immediately those tests became like a direct link to information for you. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit
Yeah.
about like what you were doing at the time? And are you still working in the same area of genetic counseling now as 5 years ago?
I am. Yeah. So at the time, I was like full time clinical in a pediatric general genetics clinic. And now I'm still part time clinical in the same space, but I also have another role like in precision medicine and more like admin. So it's kind of a 50-50. But yeah, I never thought that I would ever do one of those tests. I think that I obviously saw the utility and it's interesting, but I thought, we hear all the time people find things and then we just have to usually repeat the testing if something concerning comes up, anyways. So I never thought that I would pursue that, but I realized that there's no other way. And I was really interested in what my ancestry could be. And hopefully I was hoping to find biological family members. So, yeah.
I think it's interesting how our professional background can influence our feelings toward like direct to consumer testing so much. Because I was also like the first direct to consumer test I did it like secretly. I didn't even tell. I was a genetic counselor and working in a practice that had like 4 other genetic counselors. But I felt this need to like be secretive about it because it was almost like you shouldn't have this curiosity when we're telling our patients that they need to have this other kind of test because
Right. I always told people, like when I would be asked, well, what about this testing? I would say it's great for fun, it's like good, and for lack of a better word, I guess it's not always fun, but it's more just like curiosity, interesting information, as opposed to something that we would actually take action on in clinic. So I know people have like strong opinions either way. I was probably a little bit more neutral, but yeah, I realized immediately this is what I need to do. So
yeah, I feel like the feelings expressed about direct to consumer testing have changed over the past decade or so in our
definitely.
profession.
Yeah.
But I have tried to be on like the driving force to greater acceptance and acknowledgement of the value of direct to consumer testing, especially and even if it doesn't connect directly to medical or health findings. Because,
Right.
yeah, like our medical and our health risks fundamentally start with our family and who we're related to. And if we don't have accurate information about our family, genetic relationships, then everything else to follow also is not like,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it can be empowering. Something we definitely tell patients to know that kind of information. And then I've heard of a lot of patients since then, or even before this, who find out, these sort of family secrets through this testing too. So it's a lot.
it is. So, has the subject of donor conception come up in your professional conversations since you discovered that you yourself are late discovery donor conceived?
Not too often. At the time, I was doing more prenatal counseling because we didn't have a prenatal GC, and we've since hired 2. So I don't really work in that space unless, like, when one of them is on maternity leave, I took on some of that caseload, but it comes up occasionally, not as often. I have never self disclosed. I think, to me, where I think about it and where I kind of reflect on my own experience is when families are thinking about talking to their kids about their own like a genetic diagnosis, whether for themselves and as the parent or the child. I guess just kind of like sharing that information. So I try and tell families the earlier the better. This doesn't need to be a sit down, big groundbreaking news, a big bomb being dropped on them. Like, you can give little bits of information over time. So that's, I think, where I have that, that perspective, that like personal experience has been helpful.
Yeah. So over the course of your years as a genetic counselor, I imagine that the way you interact with the families and couples and parents that you work with has shifted. And part of that's just naturally because you're growing every experience you have. And as time passes, you just become, better at being flexible with different families that come through. How much of an impact did your discovery of donor conception have on that versus you think it would have all naturally happened?
I think that it's probably a combination. I was a newer grad when I, learned this information about myself. So I think just the comfort and, connecting with families evolves over time. And I'm, more experienced now. But I think, especially about this kind of topic and situation, I would not have had the same level of empathy or like understanding. I think I would have not have been able to have the perspective of the child in mind quite as much, especially since you're having this conversation with the parents usually. And depending on the child's age, they may or may not be involved. So I think that it's really helped kind of shape that mindset. But I think it's also in combination with just having more experience and just being more comfortable as a genetic counselor over time.
Kind of like the nature and nurture debate. It's not nature versus nurture. It's both. Like we know.
Yeah. Yeah. And who knows? I mean, especially when we attend talks and things where it's the perspective of the patient as a child or as an adult. Like I think that all is helpful to kind of see the bigger picture and everyone's involvement and everything. But yeah, it's definitely a combination of all those things.
Have you met any other genetic counselors who are also donor conceived?
I have, yeah. Last year at NSGC, there was a really interesting talk that delved into donor conception, and it was a panel. And I raised my hand and asked a question and self-disclosed as part of that question. And then after the fact, a genetic counselor that I know through a committee that I'm on came up and talked to me and told me that she also recently found out this information about herself. And so that was really nice to have, that connection, someone else in the exact same boat as me, especially in this job, which really wades into these waters more than I think someone who was completely outside of this genetics world. So that was really nice. And then when I wrote the piece in SGC's Reflections magazine, a couple of other people reached out. One was her parents' same-sex couple, so she obviously always knew that they used a donor. And then another was a somewhat later discovery as well. So there's definitely more of us out there.
Yeah, I've had others reach out to me over email that are genetic counselors, and I'm like, you guys need to form a group.
We should.
I know. Well, we need to get you guys together because
Yeah, we really should. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. I think a lot of the change that happens within any profession or within any group is a lot of times driven by the lived experiences of people that are part of that group.
Right.
And I would love to see genetic counselors that are donor conceived be involved in some of the policy statements that connect to this topic because it's woven into every specialty of genetic counseling that exists. And I know that grad school training programs are already so full with the topics that they have to cover before graduation that it's hard to add in anything new. So instead, having more continuing education opportunities for graduates after the fact, I'd love to see more of that.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I think more talks at these big conferences, the more that we can bring awareness and just different perspectives to this topic, I think the more helpful, that would be.
Would it be okay if I ask questions about your egg donor?
Sure. Yeah.
So, have you identified your egg donor, and have you identified any half siblings, like donor half siblings?
Yes. So I got a match on, I think it was Ancestry. And I sent a message right away and introduced myself. And then a little time went by, and she, like, most people don't check their ancestry and 23andMe and those sorts of things all the time. But she got back to me. We exchanged emails. And so we talked over email a little bit in those first couple of months. We've never met in person or talked on the phone. But I do know that she has two children, a son and a daughter, who are both adults, slightly older than me. And I've never met them either, but I would be very open to it. She was extremely gracious, provided a lot of really helpful health information, and told me a lot about herself and the reasons that she decided to donate. But I didn't want to, I wanted to respect her boundaries. So I haven't, the conversation kind of ended and I haven't reached out again. But I think about it often, kind of just sending an update. So I think I probably will, at some point in the near future.
And you're a mother yourself now?
Yes.
And I think that's new since you wrote your blog post.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I have a 2.5-year-old daughter named Lucy. And so she's kept us very busy. It's a really fun age. But yeah, that has actually made me think about reaching back out to her, because I know that her daughter didn't have any children, and I don't think her son does either. So it'd just be like, oh, by the way, you have a biological granddaughter. You have a granddaughter. So that's kind of been what I've thought about as like maybe opening that door again to communicate.
that's great. So, who's been the most helpful support for you specifically on kind of the shift that you made after learning this information?
I think probably my husband, Ben. He was just very supportive and really, really helpful. And then some close friends, we would talk, we've talked about it. And one friend in particular was really supportive, especially in those like early, couple months after. And then I did, even though it was COVID and it was like virtual, I did go to therapy for probably about 9 months to a year. And that was helpful just to process, kind of help me get through that hump. So,
Was this a topic your therapist had worked with prior clients before?
no, I don't think so. I think there were some similar things that she had clients deal with, but nothing quite like this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've heard that. So there is a list of therapists that specialize in like misattributed parentage as one of their specialties, but it's about like on average one person per state right now. So then the hyperlink for that is, I'll put it in the show notes. It's for the MPE counseling directory.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of the therapists that are part of that directory have lived experience, which is how they became familiar with working with.
Yeah, it's very niche, field. Yeah. So I can imagine that.
Yeah, there's some similarities to therapists that work in the adoption field, which is a little bit more well established in terms of length of time and research that we have on adoption. And there's some overlapping issues, but then obviously distinct ones. And
certainly,
yeah, I'm glad to hear that you sought out therapy, even though it was COVID. I know COVID was an intense period of history for a lot of people. So yeah. I'm glad that the internet came through for us, for many of us in that period of time.
Yeah, it was helpful. I feel like I had never really I had gone to like maybe a couple of sessions over my life, but I had never really been to therapy. So I almost feel like it was helpful, this kind of more informal Zoom, kind of helped me ease into it a little bit, less intimidating in a way. Yeah.
Were there other support resources you leaned on? Any podcasts or books or websites?
I read a couple of books, and I joined, some of the bigger like Facebook groups, but I haven't been very active or anything. I don't think I ever even posted maybe one or two times, if anything. But I think just like being a part of that and knowing that it exists and kind of staying on the fringe a little bit and like frequent, like I'm lurking, but like not, actively posting or anything. But that's just been helpful to see what's going on and what people are thinking. And if there's any like important, they always share like news stories, or if there's anything in the media or pop culture. I feel like this is coming up more and more in like various Netflix shows and things like that. So that's been helpful.
Yeah. It was interesting you said this, just knowing the groups were there was helpful.
Yeah.
And I've heard that before, that it's like just knowing that you're not alone in your experience is support in itself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and it's a lot of very similar stories, similar time frame. I feel like a lot of people, I mean, obviously IVF has only been around but so long. So I think a lot of people that were conceived like in those early days have a pretty, kind of a similar story.
Yeah. So a lot can happen in 5 years. You've had a daughter. Have there been any other major changes in your life that have happened since you originally wrote your guest blog post?
Yeah, my dad actually passed away almost 3 years ago when I was pregnant with my daughter, actually. And that was, I mean, it's always hard to lose a parent, but I think just the fact that I had he was my only living biological relative that I knew. He has a couple half siblings that we don't really know. But besides that, that side of the family and all of that information kind of ended with him. So that was, I think, particularly challenging, just knowing that was, my only known biological genetic relation. So that just added another dynamic, I think, to this whole experience. So
I'm really sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Really hard. I want to say to your mom, if she's ever listening, that took a lot of guts to fly out and sit down with you by herself. And that was a really brave thing for her to do. And I know that there are other parents that are wanting to do that and are being held back by something. So
yeah, and I completely agree. Obviously after the initial emotional reaction faded, I mean, we have a really good relationship. She's here visiting me right now, actually. And I think that, if other people are listening and they're worried that this will damage their relationship with their kids forever, obviously I can't speak to everyone's experience. Everyone reacts differently and feels differently, but that hasn't been the case for us. It's only, we're still extremely close. She is my mom, that never changed. So it just took a little while to obviously process all of this. And I still am in some ways, but that really didn't damage our relationship.
That will be an encouraging message, I think.
Yeah.
A lot of that.
Yeah, I think, if she had ultimately decided to never tell me and I found out this information maybe many years from now, like even after she herself had passed away, I think that would be really, pretty traumatic. So I'm grateful that she told me, and, knowledge and can be really empowering. And now it kind of opened up this whole new world for me. So
you're glad that you learned it from your mom and not after her passing or via a DNA test.
Yeah, like if I had just decided, oh, it's on sale, I think a lot of people do that. And then and then it's just a complete and utter surprise for everyone. Yeah, I'm grateful that it happened this way. I think she wishes that she told me much sooner. And I agree. I wish that they told me from a very early age. I think it would have changed my perspective on certain issues like that just came up, like, feeling like you're a little different or something just doesn't belong. My mom is extremely petite and I'm not. And like, why not? All those sorts of things. I just think obviously it would have been really helpful to know much earlier, but I'm still really grateful to know now.
So if someone wanted to reach out to you, in your blog post, you left your email address. Would you feel comfortable leaving that in the show notes as well?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and answering my questions.
Yeah.
I feel like we covered a lot of ground, but there's still always more, I guess, that we can ask. So,
yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of DNA Clarity and Support. This is Brianne, founder of Watershed DNA. Check out the show notes for information discussed in today's episode and head over to watersheddna.com to sign up for our email list. Never miss out on notification of new resources available in the world of DNA testing.